today's author series session. We're going to discuss the Texas STAAR redesign as it relates to writing and cover strategies and share tips to enhance student constructed response readiness. I'm very pleased to introduce our hosts today, Dr. Katie McKnight and Alan Sitomer, with sponsorship from ERC and Short Big. Few items just wanted to make everyone aware of. We will certainly be recording the session, and we'll be sharing that link to the recorded session once we are done here today. And we certainly encourage you to share that recording with your friends and colleagues and fellow educators. If you like what we're discussing tonight, please do share that with your colleagues. This is a live session and we encourage participation. So please, while Alan or Katie is speaking, go right ahead and put any questions you may have or comments in chat. We have multiple folks on our end here monitoring that, so we'll do our best to get questions answered immediately, if not as part of our session. And if we can't do that, we can certainly follow up with you on that end. Our contact information will be provided at the end of the session. So if there's any topic at all that we've covered today that you're interested in and might want to learn more about, our team is ready and available to assist you. I'd like to introduce first Dr. Katie McKnight, who began her career in education as a middle and high school English and social studies teacher in the Chicago public school system. She topped a 15-year higher education career with an assignment as a distinguished professor of research at National Louis University. Dr. McKnight has authored over 20 books and received numerous awards for both her teaching at the university level and for her publications that engage all learners across multiple disciplines. Her work in educational leadership, literacy, and professional development reflects decades of experience, and we are thrilled to have her with us today, as well as her partner, Alan Sitomer. Alan is a California Teacher of the Year award winner and accomplished author of over 20 books for children and teenagers. His decades of experience span a range of ages, from the challenges of teaching fundamental reading skills to preschoolers to the most disengaged high school English student that struggles with reading and writing. Alan's a former professor of the Graduate School of Education at Loyola Marymount University and continues to keynote and speak at conferences across the country, in addition to his professional development programming. Alan is also the Chief Executive Officer of Mastery Coding. So once again, just a reminder, put any questions or comments in the chat, and we do appreciate you joining us this evening. Looking forward to a great session, and I shall turn it over to the authors.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Hey, Katie, you ready to get after it here? I know that some people are ready to talk about STAAR. What could be more exciting, right?
Exactly. more exciting and engaging than football. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know about that, right? But so we did put together an agenda for you today. That agenda looks like, hey, the STAAR has changed. It's significant. What ought you know right there? Next point right here. Why the change to constructed response on the STAAR? What are the forces underneath driving this change? What are students now going to be asked to do? And most significantly, how can teachers prepare their learners to succeed on constructed response? So STAAR has changed. What are some things to know? Katie, why don't you take it over? What's the most important thing to know right now?
So in the redesigned STAAR writing prompts in all grade levels, that's something that's a change as well. We'll ask students to write using evidence from the text to support their response. And as Alan and I were planning today, using evidence from the text to support their response is the big one, okay? And this means that students are going to write those text-based responses on all of those tests in grades 3 to 8, and that's a big deal. So I'm excited about that too, that writing is back in fashion again. So
absolutely. And using evidence from the text is probably going to be heard about 1,000 times on today's webinar.
Yes.
Right? But underneath the hood right here, when changes of this significance come through, you want to see, did they come from kind of an intelligent rationale, or are these knee-jerk reactions by politicians? That's what I kind of always look for. And you mentioned it, Katie, and there's this thing called House Bill 3906, which is the impetus underneath it, which basically put a cap on multiple choice test questions right there. And when I think about this right here, I'm thinking, it's not often I agree with the powers that be in sort of the halls of Capitol buildings, but they got this one right. They got this one right here. Multiple choice testing has been something that educators across the country for decades have thought we put too much of a reliance on. We've thought it misinforms as to students' actual competencies, and that it's not nearly as demanding of real world readiness as other vehicles of either summative or formative assessment can be. So we're going to start off by saluting politicians. Might be the first and only time that you hear those words coming out of my mouth right there.
Yeah, good thing Mike is recording this. So.
But that's kind of it right there. So what else drove the change right here? Katie, what else drove the change?
So actually, there was feedback from educators, and how refreshing is that, right? And that really informed the main components of the STAAR redesign. So teachers had quite a bit of input. And then also the test creators, what their official stance is that in effective classrooms, teachers are asking students to write about what they read. And we know that when kids write about what they read, that is an expression of deep comprehension, high level comprehension, and using evidence from text, and to really avoid those less effective practices where it's reading without writing. So just really quickly, there's 3 levels of comprehension: literal, inferential, and evaluative. When kids have to write about their reading using text evidence, it foists them onto those higher levels of deeper comprehension. And why is that important? It's important because that's where comprehension and learning gets sticky. That's where it goes from short-term memory in working functional memory into long-term memory, and that's where those deep understandings are. So it's really critical. And of course, we all know the inexplicable link between reading and writing. So it's really refreshing, actually, for me as an educator, as a lifelong educator, to see this and that being embraced and yet promoted too at the same time.
Very, very much so. Hey, look at that word, evidence, or phrase, the evidence from the text, evidence from the text.
I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it. Never heard of it.
So the notion, Katie, and I know that this is really in your domain of expertise, but you just alluded to it right there. But can you talk a little bit more about the core principle driving the constructed response mandate and how reading and writing are reciprocal right there?
Yeah, well, I mean, they inform each other, and that's based on research that was, really fundamentally, solidified in the 80s, that there is that connection. So if you look at, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Hollis Scarborough's reading rope. And this is not new. It's not new since everyone's going, talking about science of reading. This is actually a model that's over 20 years old, but it really encapsulates, I think it's a great representation about the complexities of language, and in particular reading and writing, and those skill sets that are involved. So just very briefly on the bottom there, in very simple kind of terms, word recognitions, those are phonics, phonemic awareness. That's what we do with the little guys, and pretty much K2. But the language comprehension on top, this is what we're really getting at too. So background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, but language structures, we do this in writing. Verbal reasoning is also in, reading and writing, and literacy knowledge. So syntax, that order of words. If you go ahead and click, I've got a couple of others on there too, I think, on that. Yeah. And then verbal reasoning, so figurative, literal meanings of words. And then literacy knowledge is just understanding semantics, the meanings of words, the deep meanings of words. And so what's important here, just very briefly, is that all of these skills keep working together. And this is where writing comes in, because if kids are able to express what they know and understand from their reading on an outward expression like writing, it develops deeper meanings, deeper evaluative comprehension at a level that if we just said, hey, in the text, I want you to identify the main idea, the theme, the controlling idea, whatever we want to call it, the claim, and then 3 pieces of evidence, and that's it. And it's a fill in the blank. That's very literal level. And that's not what the STAAR is getting at. So we can ask multiple choice questions on that, but to really assess deep comprehension, which is what STAAR is going for, because that is really where the advanced levels of reading, advanced levels of knowledge, understanding, learning, where I say it gets sticky there. Writing is such a critical component of that. And one of our first, to get a little nerdy, one of our first theorists on that was James Britton, who really founded the writing to learn movement. And when kids just write more about what they're reading and what they're learning about, it has an internalization that we don't necessarily get otherwise. And so that is that link, is that they work together, they work in tandem. And so what I've noticed in a lot of states where writing is not assessed at the level that it is now in Texas is that it's just not given the emphasis as far as instruction and as part of the curriculum.
Yeah. So, and it kind of, there's a wave of foot around the science of reading right here. And so basically they've come up kind of with almost a formula, which says that reading comprehension is the byproduct of decoding and language comprehension. And they're using this RC equals D times LC, being RC being reading comprehension equals decode. Hello.
Oh, there you are. You're back now.
I'm back. Oh, yeah.
Somebody turned off the internet on your end.
Yeah, and everybody just missed like the smartest thing I might have ever said ever.
Well,
Right.
you'll get them. Yeah, and of course, this didn't happen to anybody who's online. This has never happened to you in the last 3 years. So
never, right there.
Yeah,
Just kicked out. So
all right, there we go.
all right. So all the best benefits of the webinar just happened in the 8 seconds I was gone. Apologies for that. The internet gobbled it up. But let's jump into what will students be asked to write. Okay, this is really important stuff because I know there's a lot of like administrators on this call, right? You're going to be charged with sort of getting the message downstream and across in this way. So we're trying to set you up to win when we take a moment to unpack this sort of in a more granular way. So literal examples right here is they're going to ask students to write a well-organized informational essay that uses specific evidence from the text in their answer. Okay, what are they looking for? They overtly say that they want them to state the central idea, organize their writing, develop their ideals, it should be ideas right there. There's a typo. There's a point off for me as the slide maker. I apologize for that right there. Use evidence from the text in your response. And then, of course, correct spelling, grammar, punctuation, etc. Now, this is significant because what we're here to introduce you to today is kind of an idea that Katie and I have been working on a long time, is the science of evidence-based writing. This complements the science of reading, and it is, we believe, wonderfully aligned to the objectives that the STAAR is going to be assessing. What does the science of evidence-based writing look like? Well, we need a formula. They got a formula. We need a formula. Okay. And it basically comes down to writing competency, WC, equals organized thinking multiplied by articulation. Okay, let me say it one more time. Your writing competency can be measured by the product of your organized thinking times articulation. I've given a lot of thought to this right here. Now, it can be handwritten or keyboarding right there. That's irrelevant, but I've given a lot of thought. Does this apply across genres? And I would say it holds up really, really well. So even though we're talking about evidence-based writing, Katie has written an immense amount of nonfiction. Okay, I've written a combination of fiction and nonfiction and children's books, and I can't ever remember publishing a page that I didn't think, man, my thinking needed to be organized, and I'm highly concerned with the articulation of my ideas with words, phrases, etc. So this, and obviously the higher the quality of articulation and organized thinking, and articulation and organized thinking, they allow for the hard skills and the soft skills, the creative and so forth. So this formula is what we're going to teach you how to apply to the STAAR. And we came up with a program called Short, Short, Big, which really taps into the science of evidence-based writing. Katie, do you want to talk about kind of the three domains of Short, Short, Big here?
Yeah, sure. So the three domains that Alan and I developed is claim it. So that's developing a well-honed claim. Is it reasonable? Is it highly organized? Is it well written? And what I oftentimes see in my over 3 decades in education is that, a lot of times kids are prompted to develop a claim, but the claim doesn't have any meat on the bone. It's not well reasoned. It's not well crafted, and also understanding the difference between a claim and then also a statement. That even on that granular level, kids need to have that understanding. So if you have a really strong claim that's highly reasonable, that it's highly expressed and well written, then that is strong enough to carry your writing. And then I hear this all over the place, especially with internet, with evidence-based writing, is that all evidence is not created equal, right? So all of us have read multiple papers where there's just quote dumping or evidence dumping, but it doesn't tie back to that claim. So that's that second chunk is how do you identify very solid evidence that's relevant, it's strong, it's accurate, and be able to connect that back to the claim. And that's one of the hardest things to teach. And Alan and I, here's the teaser, is that we're going to reveal what's the best way to go about that. What does the research tell us is the way to really develop that? Because that's where your thinking and your reasoning is. And that's a really tough component to teach. And then the last part, cement it, is writing a conclusive conclusion. All of us have read 5 million times in our careers as educators a final conclusion of, in my paper, I have proven that Alan is a swell guy. And so I've restated the thesis, which we tell them to do, but the conclusion is more than that, right? And it's one of those things, like it's oftentimes ambiguous to kids. So how do you take the ambiguity out of that It has to be well reasoned. It's got to be conclusive, and it's also got to. We also have to make sure that it ties everything together. And these are not easy skills. Why aren't they easy skills for kids to learn? Because they're highly complex. So when we go from, again, that literal, inferential to evaluative levels of reading comprehension or comprehension, when kids are crafting writing like this that the STAAR is demanding, that's that highest level. I have to be operating on that evaluative level of comprehension. So how do we construct that? And that's really it. Like, how do we get this ambiguity out of teaching of writing? So that's what also we're going to be sharing too.
So one of the things that we've done, we've aligned everything to the TEKS right here. Here's an example. We can provide those and so forth because we know how important that is to STAAR success and sort of classroom pedagogy right there. But let's go into a little bit more about how to generate evidence by writing success right here. So one of the things that I discovered in the classroom that really empowered my students to organize their thinking was using a research-based color code system right there. So what we want to do is we want to associate the color with the task, okay? Because whenever I assigned a paper, students never asked me, how good does this have to be? They always ask me, how long does it have to be? Okay. And that kind of cycle that you want to break. So really the trade-off that you get with your kids is, I'm not asking for length. I'm asking for quality. Okay. And when you make that bargain with them, at first they're like, oh, short response, I'm down, right? Like, yes. But then the quality, they're like, wait a minute, now I got to think about this. And so how do I set a structure up for them to think? And it begins with, once again, associating a color with the task. So those multicolor click pens are phenomenal for this type of approach to instruction, where the claim says what you know. The citing evidence says how you know what you know. And then when you tie it together with a logical conclusion by cementing it, it says why you know it right there. So a student, if they sometimes, when you're asking to do deep thinking, and not just a student, anybody, sometimes whenever I'm composing, when you even type in here, like, wait, what am I trying to say here? What's the purpose of this sentence right here? When it's associated with a color, they understand their academic objective. And then that allows us to scaffold instruction right there. So making claims, we take it sort of one thoughtful step at a time, where we're going to ask students to make a claim that is highly reasonable, richly expressed, and well written. Now, mind you, this is only one sentence right here that we are setting up to make sure that their thinking is organized about the claim and what it means and why they're putting it together, and that they are articulating their claim in a manner that sort of befits publishing, which is a fancy way of saying capital letters for proper nouns, end marks, okay, spelling, things like that right there. Now, when you slow it down to make sure that you spend the proper time teaching them how to make the claim right there, what you get is a student who's like, okay, I'm learning to ride the bike. I've always been just kind of jumping on and crashing and jumping on, and nobody's ever stopped and made me learn how to ride it properly. How do you do that? Well, it comes through the professional development that we seek to embed and or provide in webinars like this, live instruction, whatever you guys want. We've got a lot of tools on that. But once again, you see the organized thinking and the articulation. It's not just true for students that demonstrate writing competency. It's a philosophy of teaching teachers right here, where we move you through thoughtfully staged action steps to empower you to achieve success with your students right there. And then once we get the claims built, right, we move on to citing evidence to support the claim. That evidence we seek is what's the litmus test? Is it relevant? Is it strong? Is it accurate? You know, we began this kind of webinar talking a bit about Capitol Hill and the politicians, right? And they've become masters of citing relevant, strong, and accurate evidence. And you know how I know that? Because nobody can twist relevancy, strength, and accuracy until they understand how to muck it up so badly. All right. So this is literally a principle that holds student thinking to be able to discern. Are they telling the truth? Is that actually an accurate statement, which was just spouted to me? Is there strength underneath it right there? So by demanding students compose evidence, you're giving them the skill set that is a life skill of interpreting and analyzing evidence. And once again, going back to why that House bill, like, let's get rid of the multiple choice, because life does not offer multiple choice scenarios when you exit the K-12 world right there. So the emphasis on organized thinking and articulation is front and center. And of course, the professional development. How do teachers learn to put these action steps into place? Now, you'll notice there were 6 action steps for teaching students how to make claims. There's 6 action steps for teaching students how to cite evidence to support the claims. Why? Because that represents organization, that parallelism right there. These are the ideas that, you know, as the writing gets more sophisticated and nuanced, these are the ideas we bring to the fore. And then we move into cementing conclusions, where we are asking students to provide well-reasoned, conclusive, presentable statements that tie off their ideas, or tie off their idea and transition to maybe a counter argument or a rebuttal or a second thought that reiterates the first thought. So there's a lot of opportunity here once students put together sort of this framework of where they can go. So our job, as we see it, is how do we set the stage for writing competency? As we know, it's organized thinking times articulation, complemented by professional development to engender success. And with that right there, Katie, let me throw it back over to you. Like, what's the big takeaway from at least, you know, this point now of people spending their time with us?
Yeah, well, I mean, it just takes the ambiguity out of writing instruction. I think a lot of our colleagues, you know, struggled with that, and so if we apply that that science of evidence-based writing to short responses like this on the new STAAR, it's just going to be they're going to be able to demonstrate their competencies. And one of the other things too, like Alan and I have had many conversations about this, and I just put this in the chat, is that you see, like, what we've done is that there's the 3 big components. So claim it, cite it, cement it. And then within that, then there's 3 qualities. And that's what Alan was getting at with the qualitative. You know, it's not quantity, it's quality. And every sentence, this is Alan's line, is every sentence has a job. And making sure that it's tight, that there isn't any junk in there, that everything's following logically, and that gets into that organized thinking. And these are challenging things to teach. And if you go back like 2 slides, Alan, where you have like those action steps for cement it, I just want to show that too. That scaffolding again. Yeah, we don't want to show them the data yet. Okay, that's like no, go back the other way. Go back where you were. One more. Yeah. Okay, perfect. No, stop. Go. You're going too far. Okay, stop. Hold, cold, hot, boiling hot. Okay, so you can see that the instructional action steps, it's boom, 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 boom. And what I wrote in the chat area is that this is what I mean by it takes the ambiguity out of the teaching of writing. We learn best when information is chunked and then scaffolded. So we want to get to that granular level of what's the difference between a claim and a statement and build from there. Citation. This is what quotations look like, how to use a direct quotation. This is what it looks like when you paraphrase, and then breaking it down. So when you go chunk, 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 and you keep building and building and building, then the students have that skill set, and they're more confident about it because they know what to do. It's not ambiguous. It's very clear. It's very concrete what they have to do. Okay, you can scooch forward where we were.
All right.
Okay, Alan's Vanna today. He's moving
Yes.
the slides.
Moving
Okay.
the slides. That's
Moving the slides, moving us along.
So
And yeah, this is yours. Yeah, you take it away.
Well, I was just going to say that the one thing that everybody can take, I guess, solace in is that this came out of like my classroom. Okay, like this is not something that was invented in a think tank by a big, Fortune 500 corporate publisher trying to figure out, things that they're not doing. This stuff is born out of working with real students who were underperforming, very often in my own background is in Title I schools and things like that. But it was the idea that this stuff is reachable and teachable, but you need a schema. You need tools. That is so, so important right there. I talk about how tools are so important to the job all the time right there. So Katie, I think I am going to kick it over to you because part of the toolkit, right, is how do you model, how do you provide examples, and how do you provide the sort of practice that has a sense of efficacy that actually builds the skills we're talking about right there.
So in each chunk, those action steps, it all, always following this sequence, and this is based on so much research in the field of writing, is that kids need lots and lots and lots of modeling. This is also true in reading. Model, 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 example, 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 and then practice, 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 practice. And practice is probably the most important part of this, and is oftentimes what slides off because we're all concerned about time. So always model first. So there's my student claim that I want to show students, what a well-honed claim looks like. So, and then there's student evidence. So I'm going to show them how these tie together. And there's various activities, practice, lessons that the students have. There's another example on here too. So they need to see what we're talking about. And this is what I mean with the ambiguity. It's got to be very concrete, and the modeling, and this is how we develop our writing, is that we have lots of examples. So there's another one too, where it's not fair that I have to clean up my brother's toys, and there we have again another example. Okay. Yep. And then copious examples. So there's more. Here's an example. So the previous one was, good, what I would consider as a writing teacher, what I consider effective. And then here's an example of not so hot. And this goes back to like the 80s, with like Don Graves' work, Don Murray, all of them. And that they need to see what needs to be improved too. So here's a student claim, it's the same one, and then here's weak student evidence. And I'm sure you've seen something like this of, I want more money to spend on the stuff to buy that's cool. Well, that's not citing textual evidence, it's not strong. And then we have the same claim. Now, this is how we make it stronger. This is how we improve it. And it's not so much like you get 5 points, 4 points. It's that descriptive feedback. Here's how you make it better. And this is why. This is why this is stronger. And kids, when I've, like Alan, all of these are kitchen tested recipes. It's all, good housekeeping seal of approval that Short, Big came out of classrooms. It came out of the work that Alan and I have done in classrooms, but also with colleagues all over the country. And so when I show this to students, it can be a quick discussion. Turn to your partner, and what I want you to focus on is why is that second one stronger than the first one? What makes it more believable? What convinces you more about it? And the students will say, there's details in there, there's a specific example. And then kids also say too, it's like the first one sounds more whiny. And middle school kids actually say that. I'm like, yeah, you don't want to sound whiny when you're trying to make an argument, right? If you can go to the next one, Alan. So this is what we mean. So model, 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 lots of models. Now it's time for you to practice. And so we've already done that whole section on claims. So that's why it's in blue. And then here is the evidence, and the kids decide, is this strong evidence? It's weak evidence. Well, why? What did you choose and why? And there's another example too on there. So it continues. So every sentence has a job, and this is where that color coding comes in too, because we know from learning theory and the research on learning in the brain is that when you chunk like this and you get it to those granular levels and build it up, then we have greater capacity for more complex thinking, because you're developing that sophisticated, it's almost like you're building that framework. You got to build like the foundation and the frame of the house before you can fill everything else in. And that's what we're doing. Okay. So here's another example. So PQA is put the question in the answer. So when you get a prompt like this, is it sometimes a good idea for athletes to take a break? So we've done this in a previous lesson, practice PQA. You're going to use that. So make your claim, and then here's the evidence. Provide the textual evidence from the text to support that. And this one actually has a direct quotation. So we talk about the difference between paraphrasing and then direct quotations, and when you use different ones. Then after they have their example, they have a model, we discuss it. Now you do it. You do it. And so here's your claim. Now you're going to go back in the text and you're going to craft effective evidence, effective statement. And then I always ask kids too, I know Alan does as well, is you got to go back and check. Does it go back to your claim? Does it connect back with it? And gosh, I can't tell you, science teachers will talk about this all the time too. They complain about it, or I shouldn't say complain about it, but they notice it just like ELA teachers do, is that they read lab reports that the students are writing, and they see that their evidence or their data, they're not tying it back to the hypothesis, which is the claim, and being able to discuss it, whether it was proven or not proven.
So one of the things that that also is evident, just even on the example in front of us here, is if you look at the as the text says about Serena and Venus Williams, they both made incredible comebacks after illness or injury and were even better than before. Now, how many different lessons are available in here? Now, at the middle school level, how many times have I sort of been like, where is just the basic punctuation opportunity, right? And the idea of, how do you teach when to use a comma? How do you teach, does the period go inside the end quote or outside the end quote? How about capital letters and proper nouns right here? Do I capitalize the quote or not? So in a very simple sentence, which is a strong piece of textual evidence, you have the opportunity for micro lessons about the skills that often bedevil all those papers. Because what really makes paper grading so miserable on those Tuesday nights, it's the basic competencies that they ought to have learned in elementary school, right? I mean, that's just, those are the things that drive you absolutely bonkers. Like, it's hard enough to grade for ideas and content, but when they're being tripped up on not understanding how to capitalize a proper noun, subject verb agreement, whatever. Those are the things that drive teachers to, the end of their rope in that way. So we set the stage for, it's not just model and practice about how to cite textual evidence and the quality of it, but you get embedded opportunities to model and remediate skills that you've noticed deficiency in right there. And that right there is over the course of the program, you just kind of, hey, let's tune it up right here. Let's everybody remember, when we use a quotation, the period always goes inside the end quotes. Where does the period go? Inside the end quotes, right? And the kid who may not have known that, was always unsure, has been toggling back and forth in their mind. Where does this go? And just randomly guessing. Or the creative kid who kind of puts it right underneath so you can't tell whether it's inside the quote or outside the quote, right? This is how you shore up the other areas of content knowledge when through these lesson plans. So Katie, back to you in the research here.
Yeah, so practice. Dick Allington, who's Richard Allington, who's one of our most important researchers in literacy, he actually had a study that came out about 5 years ago, pre-pandemic, and talked about the importance of practice, and that practice is probably the most important part of learning a new skill or learning new content, yet it is conspicuously absent or lessened in lessons. And in working with teachers in schools, it's that time pressure, right? And so we give that up. But it's probably the most important thing, because what it does is that in your working memory, it starts transitioning into long-term memory, the learning memory, when the more and more that you practice. So it's just like, if you think about any of you who have studied a second language, if you're not practicing it on a daily basis, on a regular basis, you start forgetting it. That's a really good example of what we're talking about. And so students need that practice time. So what Alan and I are constantly promoting that, and the feedback that we both get from teachers all the time is time to create really good practice opportunities, effective practice opportunities, and those models. But Allington has done a couple of studies on it, and it's just, it is probably the most important part of developing new skills, and particularly in writing and reading and literacy.
So in no uncertain terms, the STAAR is quite specifically asking students to do a variety of very precisely identified tasks. Okay. And we made sure that we're providing the opportunity for you to properly model and provide the practice in the tools that we are offering, from the materials to the professional development, etc. And Katie, dun, da, 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 what's brand new for 2023 right
we
here?
are so geeky, nerdy, and excited about this that Short Big has been translated into a bilingual Spanish version. So Cuaderno del Estudiante is actually literally at the printers. And so Alan and I are just so tickled about it, because those of you, I mean, who as a public educator, now in the United States, doesn't have students whose first language is not English? It's very unusual, right? Everybody encounters that. And those language skills, we know from Vygotskian theory that giving those opportunities to operate within their language, of developing those deep critical thinking, that organized thinking, it absolutely then translates into the language that they're learning as well. So honing those skills in that first language, and then the thinking and the skill set develops that competency and confidence to be able to apply those skills in a second language. So it's huge. Yeah.
We're super proud of that. We're actually super proud of everything. These are labors of love and passion right here.
Yeah.
And we really want to empower people to be successful and reach these kids. As such, we can provide support in a variety of ways right there. Professional development is something that we're available to come do on-site or virtual right there. We've got a lot of different ways that we can service, from the keynoting presentations to multi-day implementations. Zoom call with a PLC, anything like that is available right there. If coaching is something you're interested in, ERC offers a lot of great opportunities therein right here. So essentially, we're just trying to set the stage for people to have success, and we're still learning, still growing, and we know that kind of this is brand new for the forthcoming year, and there's a lot of unknowns about how it's going to translate. I would just suggest that proactivity is the best response, because we know that there's a lot of people that are still like, wait, the STAAR changed. Like, I didn't know there's going to be so much writing on it. There's going to be people that in March just don't understand what they're going to face. And then the panic button is going to set in at some point, and people be like, quick, right? So this is here. This is for real. This is the new, and it's going to be around for a long time with constructive response. So the more expert your teachers are in teaching it, the better your students will be prepared to face the demands of this sort of summative assessment.
Yep.
Okay. Katie, do we want to maybe take some questions? I haven't been really monitoring the chat so much, but
yeah, I'm like the bad girl in class who just is passing notes over in the chat area with the teachers. So I never got caught passing notes in my younger days. Let me just add that, before we had phones.
I don't believe that.
No, I never got caught. I passed notes, I'll admit to that, but I never got caught. Yeah, so why don't we just open it up to any questions or comments or ideas that everyone has online today.
Excellent. So it seems as though some people have used color coding before in their classroom practice. I see that Edna talks about dialectical journey. That is absolutely a wonderful tool to kind of do it. I mean, the notion of just recalibrating that writing and producing evidence from the text is going to be doubled down on. One of the things that always helps also, and I know that there's probably a lot of ELA folks on here, but when you can start to get it into cross-disciplinary, where they're writing in other subject areas, this schema of education holds up across the disciplines. So when I come in and I do some PD, I make sure, like, let's get the ELA teachers on board first, but we're not that far from the history and social studies folks right there. And then, when it gets really fun, when you start bringing in the math teachers, because the schools that value writing and math are the schools that have the highest math scores there, because you can't just multiple choice, make it up, this and that. It's showing the thinking of your work. In math, they talk about show your work, show your work, show your work, show your work. When you write about the math, you're showing your thinking about the work.
Well, and not just, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Alan, but not just thinking too, but the application. And that's part of the new mathematical standards, is that, it's not enough to show your thinking and doing the computation, but what does the Pythagorean theorem mean in the real world, and applying it to real world contexts. And of course, that's also embedded with STEM as well, and being able to solve problems and express and presenting a solution. Like, I think it's best to put the battery here, and here's why, as far as weight distribution and things, and that everybody's making an argument. We live in a democratic society, so we're arguing all the time. So how do you construct a sound argument?
Excellent. So Jana, I hope that's how you pronounce your name. She asked, are any of the student resources digital? So we do have digital aspects to the program to avail you as the teacher and things like that. But in all honesty, there's a little bit of analog that we are valuing very highly based on brain-based research right there. Because the truth of the matter is that tactile experience of pen to paper and being able to workshop your thinking, it's been proven out over and over and over again. And even though the program, like I said, we do have digital resources, but we are a huge proponent of give the kid a highly affordable, consumable workbook where they can actually mark it up. Okay, if you really want them to learn this stuff, that's the best approach to getting that sticky thinking Katie was talking about.
Yeah, that we actually have on our site too about the research that is very clear, very definitive that writing, basically what Alan's saying, analog pen to paper is kids retain more and develop deeper thinking. So the research is super definitive on this, and we have that on our site. I appreciate too, Janet, that it's an online school. I get that. But as far as when kids are working on things, if they can with their writing, of when they're working on the skills, be able to do that, in a paper version, and then they can always do fingers to keyboard when they're writing full essays. But those practice elements, yeah, it really is, the old, not old, but paper to pencil. I mean, pencil to paper is very clearly. There's also new research too that's come out about reading comprehension and screens too, and that's a separate webinar, separate conversation. But if you email me directly, I can share that with you. And it's very clear about the impact of screens on reading comprehension.
So, and we were also asked a question kind of about scope and sequence, right? Is there a way to use it? So the belief that I hold as a teacher and somebody who creates material for other teachers is I don't want you telling me how to apply, install, and do this. This is not scripted curriculum that I follow your program. I know my kids better than you or anybody who's never met them knows them. What I need is great tools. So what we have aligned is a scope and sequence that is designed for you to use it as you best see fit. So you can use it as a supplemental program 2 or 3 times a week that has interstitial lessons and follows kind of a cadence and things like that. You can use it as a boot camp, okay, that we're just going to go straight down the middle. We're going to go page after page after page, lesson after lesson like that. You can use it as intervention in this way to remediate kills who have students who have lower level skills. You can use it to advance student skills in a way for kids in like upper elementary that are ready to tackle sort of more challenging materials. So there's no prescription as for instructional amount of time, day, or week. And when you take a look at the professional development materials, and I would encourage everybody just to go to shortshortbig.com because we've given an immensely huge amount of materials, like a gigantic chunk. So you can actually probably teach multiple hours worth of lessons to try it for yourself. There's nothing up our sleeve here. We want you to be successful. Go try it, go test it out, go kick the tires, and go see how is the PD really baked in? How is the color coding really going to manifest and so forth like that? So the notion of like implementation right there, we're certainly, Katie, myself, be happy to make available to you our time. You want a consult, give me a call right there. Tell us, what are you on block scheduling? Are you 4 days a week right there? Do you have late start Wednesday? Like whatever the situation, it's flagpole to flagpole. We can help you cook up something that meets your specific needs in a personalized way. All right. So one of the things about a good class is that it begins on time and it ends on time.
Yeah,
Right there. So
exactly.
we're coming up to the top of the hour, which is the time that we reserved for everybody right here. Let's see here. My name is Alan Sitomer. I thank you very much for spending a little bit of your afternoon with us right here. Katie, I'll throw it over to you for some closing words, maybe.
Yeah, just some closing words like thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you do on behalf of students every day. And like Alan said, feel free to contact us. We really are teachers and always willing to share ideas and more resources and information. So I'll turn it over to Mike and Bob and our hosts and wrap it up.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie. Let's see if I'm mute. If I'm here we go. I am off mute. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Certainly, we appreciate your time, Dr. Katie and Alan. Appreciate this really informative and engaging hour. And as we mentioned throughout the call, we will provide these assets to you after our session today. And our entire team is available to you at any time moving forward if we can assist with strategic planning, programming, or any other assistance that we can provide. So once again, thank you all very much for your time today. And check out our social media pages with Short Big, and we look forward to working with you soon. Thank you all.